Hello and welcome to today's video. So this time we're going to be taking a look through my collection of vintage Star Wars annuals and storybooks. So sit back, relax, and let's get to it. Okay, so this is the very first British Star Wars annual, published by Brown Watson here, and I believe this is probably my original one from back in the day. I had this one, right from when it was first published, and these are very much a UK phenomenon, these hardback annuals. Over in the States, of course, you had the American comics, the Marvel comics, and these also came in tabloid sizes. There was 3 different Marvel tabloid editions of the first film, but this is the British version, and it was very much typical of a British sort of annual of that time. So you'd have pictures and little features on the actual movie, the cast, the crew, that sort of thing, plus comic strips. And we got the original adaptation. As you can see, some of it in black and white, some of it in colour. No expense was spared, but it was still a fantastic way to sort of revisit the movie. And I absolutely loved these annuals. You know, I was a 8-year-old boy when this was published, and I absolutely loved it. Read it again and again and again. Just superb. At this point, the strip was being reprinted in the British Star Wars Weekly comic, but it was just so nice to have it all in one book, you know, like a graphic novel in effect. So there it was, the most classic of classic ones. Not the greatest of jackets on that one, but it is what it is. Now, Star Wars being Star Wars, and annuals being published on an annual basis, so there would usually be a new Star Wars or a new annual for a particular series or film literally every year, and Star Wars remained hot for a long time, so they did publish a follow-up one. It's changed to Grand Dreams now, which is what Brown Watson became. And I think this one's a bit harder to get than that first one, which I think had a massive sort of print run. But this one's a little bit harder to find. And once again, you get a similar sort of thing, but of course they have masses of comic strips to pull on. So they put on, they include stuff which came after the original movie adaptation. And it feels a sort of a grander publication, like they've spent a little bit more money on it. First little teaser there from Empire Strikes Back. Here we are, teasing what was to come. But yeah, a great annual, this one. But definitely harder to find than that first one, which is super common. You won't have any trouble getting that. In fact, most of these annuals aren't too difficult to get, and they're not expensive to buy today. You can pick them up pretty reasonably. Nothing more than that. I wouldn't have thought a tenner a book at the very most, really. And once again, this is another one which you can see elements of Empire Strikes Back already. There's Luke in his Bespin outfit. So we know Empire was literally just round the corner, but it was still a bit soon to do a dedicated Empire Strikes Back annual. So they just published this one as Star Wars again. And once again, we got the mixture of sort of comic strips. No features in this one so far. Looks like they've been a little bit lazy. Yeah, they've not included any sort of features, so it's not as good as the last album. It is simply reprinted comic strips there. But fair enough, that's okay. But then, finally, we have the first proper annual for the Empire Strikes Back. Classic cover. Once again, this one, it didn't come out in tabloid size in the States, but there was a Marvel Super Special, like a thick magazine, which is almost identical content to this. It's certainly got the full movie adaptation in comic strip form. And I seem to remember when Empire came back, I read the comic strip adaptation and then the full novel before I got to see the film, because they were published in the UK prior to the film's release, because we got it quite a while after it was released in the States, and that was really annoying. Something that doesn't happen so much nowadays, of course, because movies are generally released worldwide around the same sort of time, within a week or so of each other. But back then we had a huge wait. I always thought this adaptation was so good. I mean, absolutely fantastic. It really was. One of the best. But yeah, no features on, you know, any of the actors or special effects, things like that. It was very much just the comic book adaptation from 1980, but what a good one it is. So I mean, it warrants it, and this is a really great way to read it in this sort of hardback form. Now, the following year, Empire, or Star Wars in general, was still riding high, so they released the Empire Strikes Back annual number 2. The Star Wars saga continues. Here we are. Yeah, very imaginative, annual number 2. But this is the following year, 1981, publishing date on this one. Printing quality is not so good. You have to think that some of these were literally lifted straight from a copy of the American comic book rather than the original artwork. That's what it looks like to me, because it's a little bit grainy. That's a bit better. But yeah, typical stuff. You didn't actually get any articles on that, once again, which is a shame. They were so good, those early ones. Now, Return of the Jedi obviously got the same sort of treatment here. Much better jacket on that one as well. 1983. These are Marvel Grand Dreams is the publisher. $2.75 the price, and this one is the adaptation of Jedi. Once again, really great job was done on this one. No complaints with any of the adaptations, really. They're very much of their day, particularly the very first one. But this is, I mean, this is excellent stuff. Oh, brilliant. What a spread that is. What a splash page. Superb. And once again, remember poring over this and absolutely loving it. And once again, it's a great way to have the original Star Wars comic strip adaptation in a lovely hardback form. And once again, following the same pattern as Empire, they released a follow-up album the year later. This is 1984, and this is more selected strips from the American comic book. All the time we had a British weekly over here, so we had Star Wars Weekly, then monthly, then it went to Empire Strikes Back Weekly, and that ran for quite a while. Then, of course, eventually it was relaunched with Return of the Jedi Weekly, and that ran for a long time. And then towards the end we had an Ewoks comic as well, but they're pretty awful, but also quite scarce in the UK. But there we are. So that was further stories set after Return of the Jedi. Now this next one we got here hasn't got the greatest of covers, but it's the Star Wars Special Edition featuring Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. Actually got the BHS on the logo there on the spine. That stands for British Home Stores, which was a British department store. Long gone now, been gone at least a decade, I would think. But yeah, this edition produced exclusively for British Home Stores, and I believe it is the adaptations of Return of the Jedi and The Empire Strikes Back in the one hardback book. There we are, so that's the end of Empire there, and there's the start of Jedi. So it's an omnibus of the last 2 movies, or movies 2 and 3, in a hardback form. That actually is quite difficult to track down now, and I have seen copies of that sell for sort of £10 to £15, so that might take you a little bit of time to find, but once again, they are out there, those copies. Now we move on to the sort of tail end stuff. So this is a Marvel, it's a British annual again, it's still in hardback, but this ties in with the Ewoks animated show rather than anything in the original Star Wars trilogy. So there was an American Ewoks comic, and it was partly reprinted in a weekly comic over here, and also we had the obligatory annual. This is the Ewoks annual, and these Ewoks annuals, although I guess, you know, they didn't have anything like the same sort of print run as the main sort of Star Wars annuals, because the demand isn't there, they don't go for a fortune. So fairly easy to track these ones down. And if you are trying to be a Star Wars completist, this is dated, or published 88, this one. If you're trying to be a Star Wars completist, you do need to get these Ewoks annuals. And there is a second one as well, which is the final sort of Star Wars annual of the vintage era. Although they did bring them back when the Phantom Menace came back. And I do have that run, but I wanted just to stick to the vintage today. So this one, this is dated 85. So this is actually before that one. And I think this is perhaps the scarcest of the annuals of all. In my opinion. And once again, just comic strip content. I'd say this is probably the one that's going to take you a bit of time to track down. And if you do, it's once again probably £10 to £15 for a nice sort of copy of that one. It's got a name inside. So yeah, so there we go. So 2 Ewoks albums. So that's pretty much all the actual annuals. And then we move into the realm of the Star Wars storybook. So what a storybook was basically, you could sort of, it was the story of the film, and you would read along as if, well, you didn't have the video, so you'd read along the story, and it was like an abridged version for youngsters with pictures. That's basically the easiest way to do it, and I always remember these so well because, once again, this is my original copy from '78. I remember looking at the cast list there. Fantastic. And just superb, this. And basically, it's like an abridgment of the story, basically. Some of the classic dialogue. Great stills, nothing you've not seen. Really interesting that this one included the Biggs segment, which was ultimately cut. And I always wondered at the time, I thought, I don't remember this in the story, like, you know. And tell you something else, isn't it interesting how the actor playing Biggs there is so much like Pedro Pascal? All these years later, you know, about the same sort of age, got his moustache there. But yeah, that always mystified me. What's going on here? I don't remember that in the movie. But as you can see, it's a great book, and I kid you not, I absolutely love this one. I loved it to death. But it's all sort of the classic photos that you've seen. There's nothing that you've not seen here. And this one was published by Collins in the UK, HarperCollins, and came in a dust wrapper as well, an original dust wrapper. There we are, beautiful silver X-wing on the front there. Very, very nice. I'm sure it's sold absolutely bucket loads. It's not difficult to get. In fact, none of these storybooks are tough to get that we're going to be having a look at now. Now, that was it for Star Wars. And I don't believe the Star Wars storybook came out in softback. But I've only got a softback for the Empire Strikes Back storybook, which is a similar sort of vein. And I'm sure these had American editions as well, possibly by Random House. And same sort of format here. So this one's published by Armada paperback. It's an Armada paperback by Fontana, which once again was an imprint of Collins. So it's the same format with the cast there, but this time we've got Empire stills, and it's the same format. It just retells the story in a sort of a more simplified format rather than the full novel, with you know, the best photos and a bit of classic dialogue. Brilliant, really. And you know, this was a way for fans of the show, you don't see that one very often, this is the way for fans of the show to sort of relive, you know, moments from it, because, you know, back then we weren't always going to the cinema, or we couldn't just stream it at any time. Now, here's the one for Return of the Jedi. So we're back into hardback now, and there's a few sort of little variations of the Jedi one. So this one does say Random House as the publisher, and it's exactly the same sort of format. Got your cast list at the front there. And this does appear to be the American Random House edition of this one. Nice end papers. Great shot that, isn't it? What a special effects shot that was, wasn't it? And then it's exactly the same format as the other ones. Yeah, great movie, great storybook. Now that one also came in a paperback edition. Now this one here is a Scholastic. And once again, I believe it's exactly the same one we've just seen, but it's in a paperback format. Same book. Then in the UK, we have this one. So this is published by St. Michael. Now, back in the day, St. Michael was actually a publishing imprint for Marks and Spencer's, the food chain and clothes chain, which is still in existence today in the UK. And they used to have their own sort of book publishing arm, and they did a really great Doctor Who book in the 1970s, but they didn't miss a trick, and they generally only published stuff that was like guaranteed to sell out. So this one here, although it was only released through one chain of bookstores, or one chain of shops rather, in the UK, it's actually quite common. And once again, it's a familiar sort of format. And it's their own copy of Return of the Jedi. So that's like a little variant of that one. Then we've got it seemed to get republished again with this different jacket here. So those are the original one with Luke on the sail barge. Then this sort of second edition here has got the Darth with the Emperor's Royal Guard. So that's the hardback St. Michael version. This is the Futura British paperback version of this one. It's a really nice unread one, that. And then we've got the American version of that, which was published by Scholastic, which was like the junior arm of Random House. Exactly the same again, but in paperback. So a few different variations of the same book, 5 versions of it, in fact. So for the completists, that's what you're going to go for. Now, they did eventually pull all the storybooks together, which is a shame they didn't do it with the comic books, at least not in vintage times. But this was, it says the first 10 years, so 1977 to 1987. And let's just sort of check the details. So it was $11.95, an American one here. Random House again, and yeah, published in 1987. So this is a really nice copy, and this is all 3 of the Star Wars, the original trilogy storybooks, in one sort of soft-bound, large format album. How lovely is that? What a great way to read them. So I'm not really sure how easy it would be to pick up one of those now, but I suspect it might be quite tough. Okay, lastly then, I do have a couple of Droids items, which I didn't want to miss out, because these are in effect storybooks, although they don't relate to any of the movies. So we've got this one here, which is The White Witch, which I think is actually an episode of Droids. It's been a long time. In fact, I've only ever sat through them once. This is dated 86. This is like a hardback storybook of, I believe, of that particular episode. Quite nice. It's in hardback. I keep it with my sort of storybook, so that's why it's there. We've got this one here, which is another one, The Lost Prince, a droid adventure, Random House again. A different format to the other one there, so a little bit wider. And it's better artwork on this one, actually. But once again, it's a traditional story. It's only 30 pages, so not really a long one. But these were designed for youngsters. 1985, this one. Quite nice there. I like this sort of stuff. And then one real oddity, it's a French one, which I've got a French Ewoks one. La Pierre Mystérieuse, Les Ewoks. And this was, as you see, there was a couple of other different ones as well. I don't think I've got those two, but I do have some small format ones. But yeah, Whitman, France. So this was definitely a French one. And it's numbered number 2, so I don't know if... No, I think that might be just the publisher's label. 1987, this one. It's got the same sort of art style that we're familiar with. But yeah, all French language, so a bit of an unusual one, that, which I would have got from my friend Lauren over in France, who we used to trade Star Wars stuff with each other back in the 90s, and that would have come from him. So there you go. I hope you enjoyed looking through my collection of vintage Star Wars annuals and storybooks. I really love collecting these, and in all honesty, there's 20, 25 books there. Definitely a collection you could pull together and get a lot of enjoyment out of. If you have enjoyed today's video, do please give it that thumbs up. Do please hit the subscribe button if you've not already for regular vintage Star Wars content, and I'll look forward to seeing you again very soon. Bye.